Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Adekunbi Adeoye, and you're welcome to this event. I don't even know if everybody can hear me, but I'm assuming you can. Let me see how many participants we have here today. Okay, we have about 13 people. Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us from everywhere in the world. We wonder where you're coming in, where you're coming from. If you could just leave a message on the chat room, that'll be fantastic, just so that we can recognize in a true African fashion. Oh, someone says they're from New Bedford, Massachusetts. Okay, you're welcome. You're very, very welcome to this interesting conversation with Akinyi today. And this event is happening actually in partnership with Common Spaces, Harvard Common Spaces. You can also check their upcoming events on their website at commonspaces.harvard.edu. So you're very, very welcome. Those of you joining us from Los Angeles, from Honolulu, from Boston as well. Peggy, I can see you. Thank you so much for joining us from all across Africa. We are very well represented. Just for introduction again, my name is Adekunbi Adeoye, and I am going to be the moderator for this amazing session. And we're going to be talking about, education in Africa in the wake of COVID-19, as my president will say. What exactly can Africa do? What are the steps we need to take? And we have the awesome privilege of having with us a very amazing, amazing, amazing woman who's joining us today. And she is Mrs. Akinyi Williams. If you can just, put in the chat room and say welcome. I'm going to be having a lot of that just because I can't see people. And in Africa, we're very communal. I want to argue. I want to know whether the jollof rice is popping. I just want to be sure that we're all good. So thank you so much for joining us, Mrs. Akinyi Williams. So before I go on, I definitely would like to, introduce her in the proper fashion. So let me just start by saying Ms. Akinyi Williams is the founder and executive director of Hope for the Child. She's also the co-founder of Destination Teach, an organization that works on teacher development opportunities in resource-poor settings. Akinyi also serves as a pro bono country consultant for Elster Foundation, an organization that works to improve access to essential drugs and basic healthcare to children in developing countries. She's currently an independent management consultant as well as a certified project manager with over 15 years of consulting experience, both in the healthcare space, education, technology, and as well as finance. She's an expert in driving program objectives in business. And also she's consulted in several capacities, and as well as began her education at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, just in case we have the Kenyans in the house. She's also earned a Bachelor of Science in Business at Metropolitan State University, an MBA from University of Minnesota, and also a Masters of Education in International Education Policy from Harvard University. She lives in Minnesota with her husband as well as her children. So thank you so much for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it. So let me go.
Thank you.
Yes. So let me go right to my first question for the day. And it is, okay, give me a second there. Okay, so let me just have you introduce yourself to the house. Just let us have a feel of who you are as well as your current work and what you're doing in consonance with your education in Kenya, as well as what you're doing on the continent.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much to all who joined the call. It's an honor for me to be able to share my thoughts. There's so many people who are sharp in their knowledge in this space, much sharper, much more experienced. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and the little that I know. I'm from Kenya, and I have lived in the US now for 25 years. And I started nonprofit organization, Hope for the Child, back when I was doing my master's program. And our mission was very simple, just to provide access to education to the marginalized. Because growing up in Kenya, I saw these disparities. My mother had 9 kids. And so we lived in the projects. And so it took a lot of work to get us out of the projects. But then the transition that happened for me and the impetus for this was noticing that when I moved out of the projects and into, something that was much better, I realized that I left all my friends behind. And I started wondering, why is it that I get to have a chair, or I get to have a school that doesn't have broken windows, whereas where I just came from, all my friends don't have anything. And so that kind of was the impetus to starting a nonprofit. I knew that at some point when I have the resources, I am going to have to do something, bring chairs, fix the place, help more kids get access to an education. So my passion is targeting, if you know anything about, or if you've heard, I'm sure you've heard, especially if you're in academia or you're in school, you've heard about the pyramid. And, there are those 4 billion people, in world economy that are at the bottom of the pyramid. And those people make about $1 a day. Yep. And so if we think about the groups of people, there's 3 groups in this pyramid. You have your bottom of the pyramid people who primarily my nonprofit serves. Then you have that middle, where they make about $1,500 to $20,000, purchasing power, right? Then you have those over. So the programs, the nonprofit I started 13 years ago targets the kids down in the 14 billion bottom of the pyramid. So as we talk about some of these solutions and the work that we do, right now we have 2 schools. I have a school in Kisumu, Kenya, right? And then it's actually, so we have 2. There's one in the township of Kisumu, and then we have another one in rural Kisumu. And they're fascinating because they're differing in their needs. They're very different, even though they're like the one in the rural is the last mile. And then the one in the township, they have access to some more stuff, but they're just as poor and they are just as much in need. So for 13 years, the nonprofit here in Minnesota has been working hard to provide access to education to the 2 schools, and we have about 200 students in the township school. And then the one in rural just started less than a year and a half ago. And there we were now up to 80 students. And then in the last 2 months, the Kenyan government shut us down. So that was staggering for us as we're trying to grapple with the effects. We're waiting for the government to sort of tell us, but the government is not really moving. They're looking up to the private sector. So it's just a tug. But I just wanted to set that context that in the strata that we serve, there's 3 in the pyramid. And so the problems is the same, which is COVID, but the solutions for these 3 different groups are markedly different. And that's the bridge we're grappling with.
This is so good to hear about the work you've done over the years. And this is remarkable considering, how large these challenges are, especially when we talk about out of school children or, education exclusion on the continent. So I guess my first question will be, according to UNESCO, Sub-Saharan Africa actually has one of the highest rates of education exclusion in the world. And over 1/5 of children between the ages of 6 and 11 are out of school. And they're, most of them followed by 1/3 of the youth who are currently around 12 to 14. Almost 60% even of people who are within 15 to 17 are still not in school. These are recent statistics. And now we have this huge challenge. We have, which has really worsened this huge divide between those who have access to education and those who do not have access to education. There's several things that have happened in the course of, COVID-19, and how this pandemic has really opened up what happens on the continent. So my question is, what do you think Africa should do in the light of these challenges? I also recognize that as much as I'm asking you this question, I'm asking you these questions in the capacity of, someone who is enlightened, somebody who's worked a lot on the continent. So just shed some light in terms of what do you think governments, especially those who are listening to us across the world, who are everywhere on the continent, who are seeking direction, that what exactly should we do going forward? You can also leave some of your questions in the chat room. I will be able to take them. Yeah, so over to you, Akinyi.
Well, I gotta say, that's a fantastic question. And, there's so many elements. Well, for starters, let's just set the context here. Africa as a country, as a continent, has over 50 countries. And so if we are talking sub-Sahara, which is the large majority, basically just from, let's say, Egypt, going down and not including all those countries up north by the desert, that's a large group of people with diverse cultures, diverse languages, diverse religions that drive how these people do things. So as we have a broad sweep of Africa, we just have to bear that in mind, that Africa is a culmination of many, many, many countries. So with that in mind, let's talk about what should Africa do. Well, first of all, let's talk about the challenges, right? So when you're talking about the challenges, we know that as a country, there's a digital divide. And, according to Brookings Institute, internet is a big, big, big gap. Africa has an internet penetration of about 39%, and the world is at about 62%. So there's a large gap in that digital divide. And Kenya as a country, we've done well compared to other countries. We're at about 89% internet penetration. So when we're thinking about education and how things like remote learning can happen, the vast majority of solutions come through internet connectivity. And right now we're lagging in the digital divide. And so back to your question is, what should Africa do? Well, there's two sets of problems. The impact of COVID to the people at the bottom of the pyramid, there's nothing Africa is doing. And to the middle sectors for the private, because if you look at it, the folks down who are making less than $1 a day, schools are shut down. And so they don't have any access to any remote learning. They don't have internet connectivity. They're just cut off completely. And so for them, school is dark. There's nothing going on. They're waiting for the government to open the school. Then you have that middle sector, and the majority of the people in that $1,500 a month to $20,000, $1,500 to $20,000 a year, the middle of that pyramid. The bulk of those people are going to either nicer public schools or private schools. So for them, especially those in private schools, the impact they're seeing from COVID is minimal, right? Why? Because they have internet, they have digital resources, they have connectivity. To answer specifically, what do you think Africa should look at doing? Well, in answer to that question, I reached out to some of my colleagues that are much, much, much smarter than I. And also, like Peggy out in Kenya, I reached out to Amandla in Mackenzie. I reached out to other colleagues that, have opened wonderful, started wonderful nonprofits and are on the ground in Kenya. Then I've also done some research with my fellow teachers in the two schools. I've spoken to them. And, you know, from a macro perspective as Africa, infrastructure, you know, is number one. In order to gain access to connectivity, in order to get high-speed internet in the hands of the people, infrastructure seems to be a big deal. And in order to get that going, there has to be investment. The leaders have to believe that this is a priority. And so they have to invest a larger percent of the GDP in infrastructure. Other things I'm seeing is, you know, once that infrastructure is placed, now understand me that infrastructure is not something that they can do next week. There's long-term and short-term you know, implications and solutions that are needed for this big problem. You know, so we've talked about infrastructure. Then now there's the workforce, skilling up, you know, the human resources, the people. Once you have that infrastructure, how, and for us in education, we're thinking teachers, how are we going to empower these teachers to be able to leverage that infrastructure that has been put in place to reach the learning goals that we've set out for ourselves. And then right behind it is platforms, you know, platforms like the Googles and the Amazons. How can the government, you know, can we invest more in digital platforms so that people can conduct business online? Like one example is M-Pesa. You know, I have some projects and work that I do myself in Kenya, but even though I can use M-Pesa, I find myself stuck, and I have to move around with large amounts of money to accomplish these projects because there are no platforms that will, you know, or that will help assist some of my transactions. So that's one. And then the other one is some sort of subsidy. You know, there has to be a way in which we can help those at the bottom of the pyramid have access to the same things as those people in the middle or higher. You know, you can have wonderful connectivity and wonderful digital platforms, but if the poor, like for example, 99% of the students we serve in our schools are dirt poor, abject. They're like dirt poor. And in order for them to even think about a smartphone, right now they're using things like flip phones, you know, simple phones in order to get their M-Pesa. But in order to access some of these high streaming programs, they need a subsidy to help them so that we achieve that inclusion gap. So these are some of the things. And then of course, lastly, an educator will never walk out of a podium without saying, create an ecosystem where entrepreneurs, you know, can have space, or innovators. You know, we have a large population of young people in Kenya, a place where they can innovate and do startup to kind of support the creativity of the young people in Kenya. So those are the things that I think holistically Africa, we can do, sub-Saharan Africa.
Wow, this is really amazing. This is really top level stuff. So let me just run it, you know, what you said, because there's just a lot of points. You're just hitting me on every angle. The first thing you said is infrastructure, how important that is to setting the tone. And that sort of increases that leveling ground and levels everybody to be able to, when everybody has access to the same thing. So infrastructure is so important. And another thing you said is skilling up the workforce, skilling up every single person who is within the systems. So if you're talking about teacher development, you're talking about teacher development in light of where the digital divide is and bridging that gap. Another thing you mentioned is enriching, ensuring that donors also have a voice in this, which is by creating digital platforms that allows for digitization of so many things that we currently have that are not at that level. Another thing you mentioned is subsidy, as well as creating an ecosystem that allows people to come in and solve these problems that Africa has. So this is amazing, and this is so interesting. Yeah, another question just following up to what you said is considering, I'm trying to point us in the direction of your work with Hope Child, I want you to tell us a bit of if there's a current work that you're currently doing, or you can point us to work on the continent that looks like anything that you've already talked about. Maybe not necessarily your own organization, but organizations that you that are pointing in the direction of what it is that you're trying to say. People who are doing the work. If there's a way that you can sort of expose the ideas as well as how this alludes to what it is that you've been saying, that would be really amazing. And also, please kindly drop your questions in the box. Akinyi is here with us today for just this 1 hour. We won't be able to find her easily next time. So
I'm in Minnesota. You just have to grapple with the cold weather, and we're still in winter here. So
wow. Please feel free to drop your questions. Thank you to those who are complimenting our lovely outfits from Kenya as well as Nigeria. We just have to represent the continent very well. So I would go over to you, Akinyi, for the second question.
So the work we're doing, I wanted to share a short video, to kind of highlight to you the type of work we're doing, and hopefully that will provide, some context, right? Let me know if you can see it, and then
no problem.
Can you hear it?
Yes.
At Arise and Shine, what we want the kids to feel is that they have a sense of belonging. The best time is the morning. Just the sights and the sounds of these kids coming in through our front entrance is priceless. The fun part is seeing how they quickly organize and become one student body. Wherever they came from, they just come together and they sing and they dance and they shout with one voice because they all know that they're part of a family.
I started Destination Teach. It was then Destination Teach, now Destination Impact, back when I was in grad school in 2014 with Akinyi. I'm just always very in admiration of Akinyi because of the work that she's been doing. She doesn't live here in Kenya. She lives in the States and has been able to just oversee so many things that are happening here. When we first got here, we didn't really know what we were going to do. We just knew that we needed people, we needed more resources, we needed exposure for the school.
So I just want to say thank you so much for all of you coming.
The children I've been asking, it's just been coming every year.
Oh my God, I remember mine. Okay, don't tell me that, I'm crying.
I think sometimes when we think about students in poverty, we think, oh, all they need is the basics. We don't focus on things like a library.
The front there, you will see, will take you to Destination Teach Library. We started Ida, yay, shout out.
Or just coming in and throwing a party and giving kids good memories. That's what we've been able to do with Destination Impact. Bring people together to come and be changed, to understand what it's like here, what life is like here, not just the poverty, but all of it. Get a really holistic perspective on Kenya, and also to give back.
Okay, so that was a video that was shot just last October, last fall. And so that tells you a little bit about the impact the work we're doing is having on people. And then the lady you heard from, Chandel, is actually a classmate who we wanted to do work together, so she came to visit from Harvard, right? And then and she wanted to also highlight the kind of work we do. So in a nutshell, our mission is access to education to the poor, right? The really marginalized population that are at the bottom of the pyramid. And what we're providing for the last 13 years, kindergarten, pre-K to 4th grade education. And for them, for those, we kind of try to stratify and see who is really in need. So for those students who can, we try and squeeze $5 a month from them. And for those that we cannot, we don't. Now compare that to those private schools, like the schools next door that are, good, well-performing schools, or those schools where parents in the middle of the strata take their students. They're paying upwards of $210 a month, while we cap at $5 a month, right? So that kind of gives you some perspective on the kind of student we serve. The vast majority of our students come from the local slums. So they walk to school, or they ride on this thing called boda boda. That's just a horrendous means of transportation, where like 6 people, a mother and her 3 kids, and hubby is in the back on a motorcycle. It would horrify any Department of Motor Vehicle Services to see. So they walk to the school. And what we do is we provide access to food. We have a food program. We make sure that nutrition is at hand. We have secured a farm. We make sure that the farm provides nutrition, subsidizes the food for the kids. We have sanitation. We make sure we have toilets, brand new toilets we put last week. A donor gave us enough funds to upgrade the toilets for both the schools in the town and in the rural. We do teacher development, so we make sure that our teachers have the certification. We send them back to school. And then we have a library. Now, this library is the brainchild of me and Chandel, the lady, my former classmate you saw in the video. They wanted to do something. She's in New York. They decided they wanted to do something. I said, hey, how about we build a library and we'll just call it Destination Teach. So those are the things we do. We provide not just education to our students, but we provide food, nutrition, and we support the livelihood and the economic development. We have loan program that I set up a couple of years ago, where we give access to financing for teachers if they want to develop, maybe buy a phone, buy a bicycle. So we give them loans. So because of our donor funding, hopefully the child has found a way to be able to, because after all, we pay them every month. We're able to put a monthly payment where we deduct a little bit to pay towards, like the phone or the bicycle or student school uniforms. We provide school uniforms to the majority of our students, but then we want those parents to cost share, because that's how we know they're committed to the education. What we do is there's 3 legs to what we provide. It's safety, first it's learning. Secondly is safety and wellness of our students. And thirdly is nutrition. So those are the 3 kind of legs that we stand on. And in the wake of COVID, we've seen this great divide where the government has shut down all schools, like I mentioned earlier, and the private schools, they're going on. They have streaming. They're charging their students on top of the fees. They're charging them extra, and then students are supposed to stream in and log in because they have laptops at home, and for them, learning continues. Whereas for the public, we have folks like in the slums. If you guys have been watching anything in Kenya, we have people stampede because they need food in the slums. So the police are beating the people because of the lockdown. So the people are scared to even do anything. So the lower, very poor people are kind of immobile. They're not able to be mobilized to do anything substantial. So in the last several weeks, there was a stampede in one of the big slums in Kenya, and the government just shut down like food, community outreach programs or food donations to the slums, which added another challenge to what we're trying to do, because we put together a participation and engagement program in the last few weeks to reach out. We want to reach out to our students to take them learning materials to just visit the students in the slums, because most of the teachers live in the slums with these kids. So we wanted these kids to just do an outreach program where we'll go out and take some learning materials, just take a bag of cornmeal, right, for porridge, and at the same time have a look around and see, is the child safe? You know, does the child look abused? You know, just an outreach program to touch all of our students. So we launched that a couple of weeks ago, and now we're measuring and taking in numbers back to see how successful it is, because we have to be mindful of the teachers. In the work that we're doing, there's several things we can talk about, like, for example, we've talked about the role of technology. The role of the teacher is big. We have development of teacher programs, but in this time specifically, the safety of the teachers is a big deal as they go out and reach out to these students, because they've been in the black for 2 months. And so getting the teachers to show up, you know, chugga back and show up to work, getting the teachers to come up with a plan, training the teachers on adjusting and feel safe, you know, go 2 by 2. Supporting these teachers is key. And then learning, it's a loop, bringing back the learnings. You know, if 2 teachers went to a certain slum and they learned that they couldn't do something or that they were not safe, bring that back and we improve the program. We don't trust that the government is going to open schools on June 1st magically. We suspect, in talking to the teachers, we suspect that they might push it back, but we'll see. As far as programs, the role of the government, we've seen radio programs, we've seen things like EDU TV, you know, where they stream, they have TV 1 hour per week, per grade, per class. Yes. And I asked my teachers, how is that working for you guys? And they were like, it is not. It is not, because you have to have the kid has to be set at that time to watch that show. And if they're not understanding, who's going to explain to the kid what the program was about? So the radio programs and the Edu TV, which are touted, are fine, but at some point, it doesn't really work for the target population we're working with. The government has also given like a soft copy of learning materials. They call them Tusome books. They've given those to grade 1 and 3 that we've seen. So what they've done is they've created this book, learning guide or learning thing, you would call it. And they've emailed it, right, to the public schools alone. Private schools, I don't think, have access to it. And what they're doing is they're saying, well, here's the soft copy. Schools, go ahead and make copies. And it's at 10 Kenyan shillings per page at the printer, which is like about 10 cents per page. They're having to shell out $30 to print a packet. So that's prohibitive. You know, they're not able to print these packets up and pass them out. You know, they don't have the money. And so that learning guide from the government is good, but I guess they didn't think through the distribution and making sure that all the public schools have that book. Other things I've seen, other things I've seen are is the role of nonprofits, other organizations like Metis, for example, or other nonprofits trying to work hard, working with the leadership to find a solution to this, maybe supporting the teachers. But by and large, the public side, there's no activity. They're waiting. And I asked my teachers, you know, this morning and even yesterday, are you guys serious? You're just waiting? You know, and they said, Akinyi, a lot of the public schools, all the public schools are waiting. What we're trying to do in the last 2 weeks is foreign. They're just not doing that much, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah. So we have some questions for you, and what you've said is, you know, is with me as well, and maybe what we can do as a whole, because I want people to begin to implement tomorrow if possible, if you get what I mean. Yeah, so this has been extremely helpful in that direction. So I'm just going to take some questions from the chat, so people know that we can see them and we're going to take some of these questions. So someone has mentioned, because you've talked a lot about collaborations, especially when you collaborate with farms, you collaborate with sanitation agencies or organizations like Destination Teach, like you mentioned. So someone is asking that, do you think a collaboration with village chiefs or elders, where they can be provided with materials such as students, have access to these challenges? Another question that I just want you to take it all together is, if someone says, our country is grappling, I think this is Peggy from Kenya. She says, our country is grappling with questions of how and when schools should reopen. Should we think about sequencing the reopening of school, maybe like from rural, urban, primary, secondary, and tertiary, so that you can meet the education needs of students while we keep them safe? Yeah, I think there's also a question from Joy Ogbonna. She's Nigeria. She says, I think you mentioned that Kenya currently has about 80% of internet coverage. She's saying, what is the power supply like? And how do you engage parents and families within your own organization? So I don't know if that was too much.
Yes, we're gonna kind of speed through this. We're gonna do a speed dating situation. But those are great questions. Let's talk about collaboration. We find that in the 13 years I've been doing this, trying to get efforts to collaborate with the local entities, like those that are based in Kenya, has been challenging for me. Now, as some of my colleagues would say, like Peggy would say, she might have a different, because they live in Kenya, right? Versus we who live in the diaspora. She might have a different experience on how to get collaboration amongst local entities. But for me, I find that it's very challenging, especially since I have to travel, I have to build trust. And then there's this, somehow there's this paradigm of, why are you wanting us to give? You guys are the ones with the dollars, right? So I find that collaborative efforts are tough. I have the highest success, without getting into politics, I have the highest success with just setting a project, getting the funding, and then doing it, along with my group of board members here. I find that the most support I get is from here, Americans like Renee, for example, wonderful people, my classmates who are here. That's the greatest collaboration I get. By and large, the government doesn't do anything for any of the initiatives. Like I mentioned to you, the library was a former classmate who said, hey, how can I do something? And I said, you know what, we need a library. And so we worked together to create that library. Interestingly enough, we need books. So you see the books behind me in my home library. Packaging these books to Kenya is very expensive. And so whereas we have a library, we are yet to furnish it with the books that are needed. So that's a need for us right now. Local chiefs. The local chiefs are supportive, but there's a lot of corruption. So we find that I have the most success, for example, the rural school, I have the most success when they agree with what I want to do. I have the most success when I use a local person to do the talking, even me. So when I go to Kenya, I can't look like this. You won't recognize me, right? I'm out there doing my thing. I can't, I have to really be demure. And then I have to speak the language. And then I have to talk to the chief or have my father, my father do most of the talking. And then sell them on what I'm trying to accomplish, because once you have the local engagement, then the project goes better. And so that's how I deal with the local buy-in from the people, is I have to be there. It's tough to gain that trust because a lot of them don't trust that you're going to see it through. And so then there's the thing of corruption. They're like, okay, well, why don't you buy me a goat? And then I'll help move your process faster. And in some cases, unfortunately, I have to. I think about, okay, what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to build a school here. If you take a goat, have your goat, give him his goat, let's do this. So that's collaboration. Reopening sequencing, I think it makes sense to reopen the much younger ones first in the grand macro scheme, because the parents can't go back to work if the baby is at home, or the younger 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old is at home. The pre-K to third grader, we need to check him in somewhere. I can't go to work or pursue something effectively if my K to third grader or fourth grader doesn't have a babysitter. As we get to 6, 7, 8, the higher grades, those can kind of take care of themselves. But I think from that perspective, for economic, the younger ones, putting them somewhere so that the older ones and the adults can actually get back to work and earn. Otherwise, they're tied. Incidentally, this is problematic for our school. A lot of our teachers come to school with babies, and it's very it's very hard. You have 3 teachers. We're happy they had a baby, but you can't teach class with your baby on your arm. So it's like, how do you deal with that? Which is something we have to pick up. But as far as the sequencing, I think close collaboration with the teachers themselves makes a difference. If it's like a bowl of spaghetti, if you pull one spaghetti, it impacts the entire bowl. And so I find that these little ones have to go to school first before the older ones. Then there's the issue of the curriculum. There's a curriculum change going on in places like in Kenya, for example, the CBC, they were changing the curriculum to stagger education differently from an 8-year primary school, 4 years high school to 4-year college. Now they're changing it to something interesting, like 2 years, 6 years, 6 years, and then 3. And that is causing a lot of problems, because nobody has been trained, but even that is at a standstill, so this reopening has to take the curriculum readiness into consideration before we reopen. We talked about power supply. The school in Tomboya, in the township, we have power. So, when it comes to if you have connectivity, you can just plug in, to charge your phones. But the rural does not have power. So we're going through back and forth with the local authorities and also with the donors. We have to size up as an organization. Can we afford to pay the power or to pull power into the village? That's a big question that we're yet to resolve. The power supply in the rural is absent. And so that's another thing with infrastructure, getting electricity to the last mile. That's non-existent right now. The role of the caregivers, this brings us to the strata.
The question about parental as well as family involvement within your organization, how well do you engage families in this shift of learning?
That is so. That is a fantastic question. You're going to get my international education policy MED people on fire on that question, because in the equation of education as an output, right? If you think of education as a product, right? You have all these inputs that go in to make the product of education that is then pushed out. One of these things is parents, right? And I see you smile because you know what I'm saying. So the people who are at home determine the success of any education. On a good day, COVID or not, the parents who are investing in education are those who believe in education. And interestingly enough, education begets education, meaning if you even have books at home, that begets children who are reading. You'll be surprised how many homes we serve don't have books at home. It's not there. They have a huge TV. They have a huge huge music system. In a tiny little slum box that they live in, they have huge TV, but they don't have books. So, you know, that's the big divide on a good day. This is not even adding COVID. On a good day, you have strata. You have that middle people who believe in education and they are willing to fight to get it. Then you have this lower 4 billion people at the bottom of the pyramid who are still not convinced that education is not really the thing I want to do right now. And so as an educator who runs schools in Kenya, I am constantly fighting with these caregivers, shockingly, to let their kids come to school. You almost have to give them something like, okay, how about this? How about if I give you some food? How about if I send food home? You know, will you let the kid come? Because they'd much rather have the kid prostitute themselves. They'd much rather have the kid sell something. They'd much rather have the kid tend to the family goat, you know, all day than bring the kid to school. So in that lower strata, the role of parental caregivers is very limited. They were not even convinced that this is even a good idea. And then if you've watched the news in the slums, right now they're grappling for economic sustainability. They need food. They're not going to have an education conversation if they haven't eaten. You know, just 2 weeks ago, there was a stampede in Kibra, you know, one of the biggest slums in Nairobi. Stampede because of food supply that was not even issued by the government. It was issued by a donor. And 2 people died over the stampede. It's very sad. So how are you going to talk to a parent or a caregiver at Kibra, who is 90% of the population we serve, to not worry about food? Let's talk about your cell phone and the learning materials I sent yesterday. Can you tell me progress on, is your little one doing the math? Are they doing their homework? They're like, get out of here. No, I'm hungry. So they're standing in line all day looking for food because of the lockdown. They're right now, they cannot have a conversation. So that's the lower. But the middle people, it's easier to convince the caregivers. They're more willing. In fact, you know, like we said earlier, they are disciplined. They believe in education. They'll have their kids sit down and watch the 1-hour edu TV programs, the radio programs, because they believe in education. And you don't have to convince them. They're paying for it too, right? Even during these COVID times. I think those are the 4 questions we covered.
Wow, this is really enlightening. This is really enlightening. I'm going to strike with just 2 questions of mine, even though I have everything popping, so to speak. And this question is, I'm going to take Toks Bakari, and she says, do you envisage a new post-COVID situation for education in Africa? When you say changes in significant in curriculum changes, or significant change in the way that education is delivered on the continent. And she's wondering about innovative as well as, you know, alternative means of education delivery. This is beyond physical schooling and digital platforms. Beyond this, what does this situation present us in light of our curriculum as well as how education is delivered?
You know, pedagogy, or, you know, the delivery of education is a very interesting topic because, you know, I look at health. How has public health done it, right?
Yeah.
How has public health gotten that stupid pill to the rural, to grandma, great grandma, who's sitting in a hut out in the middle of nowhere? And public health has taught us that it's through social workers, community workers, volunteers. You know, it's through getting community involvement and training them to get resources out to the last mile, right? One way, the only way that will work, well, I shouldn't say the only way, the success rate will be determined on how sold the government is on your initiative. But when you have things like corruption, it kind of dummies down and makes it very difficult to make any progress. In a way, what I mean is that, you know, the government was just fine with this section of not being educated. They were just fine with this section of the population not having anything. And then all of a sudden, here come Akinyi who wants to do something. Well, Akinyi, how about you cut us a check first? You know, cut us a check for this amount, and then we will talk about what we think you can do. And then, you know, if the other alternative, you know, this is what my father usually says, Akinyi, just start it, you know. Whatever initiative you're thinking, just start it, and then let them catch you and make you stop. Now, sometimes we're lucky that we might, for example, we wanted to build a water well, and you know, the government wanted a lot of money, and this was like in rural area, and they wanted money to be bribed to get permits for this well and whatnot. Eventually, my dad said, you know what? It's been 5 years. They're not giving us what we want. Let's just build it and see what they do. Let them stop us. So we did. One morning, I took one of my board members. We flew down to Kenya and we started the water well project. And just like that, we did not call the community, just started it. We mobilized the people we needed, the resources we needed, and we just started it. And by the time the government came around to realizing something was going on, it was complete, right? And so that you just have to be creative. So in terms of delivery of education, I would just say working with the locals to determine the best way to disseminate distribution. They know the solution. You know, in some communities, they might say, oh, witch doctors are very popular here. If you want anything done, you need to make sure the witch doctor is signed up to your initiative. So then you visit the witch doctor. The witch doctor will tell you how to distribute your learning materials, right? And so you just have to be creative.
Amazing, amazing. This is extremely so great. I can literally write a book on everything you've said. You're really touching my, you know, the part of my brain that loves this kind of conversations. And I'm sure everyone is excited that you've done this today. We're, you know, rounding up. This is just 6:54 and we're going to end it at exactly at 7. So I'm going to let you, I don't think I can take any more questions because I want to really just bring everything in. So I want to ask you if you have any final words for our, you know, our amazing people who have joined us from across the world. Do you have any final words? If for example, you want to talk to somebody who is thinking about working with government, or, you know, who's working with government, or with a donor agency, what's that thing? Because everybody's scrambling, looking for, you know, recruiting people who are going to work post-COVID in Africa. The rate of philanthropy is going to literally go all the way up. So what's that last word you have for, you know, people?
Well, I just want to close with thanking you again. And then I want to say, hey, you know, the website for organization is hopeforthechild.org. hopeforthechild.org, and maybe Kunbi can type it into the box. Yes, hopeforthechild.org. And I'm on LinkedIn, Akinyi Williams. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't attempt to hide because I'm not successful. People will always recognize me. So that's the website information. Yeah. Regarding last word, I want to be part of the solution. You know, the problem is large, and these things we're talking about are not 2-week solutions. They are multi-year projects with billions of dollars. For example, digital divide. How can we tackle that digital divide? Well, it's going to take private-public partnerships. It's going to take working with the public organizations to get, you know, and if you can't find a way to get started anyway, you know, but these are like, it's going to take $80 to $100 billion and 10 years, according to, you know, Brookings Institute, to start bridging the digital divide. Yeah. And it's going to take human capital. It's going to take energy. Yeah. It's going to take infrastructure. It's going to take people who are passionate about education and about giving back, impact investors who don't necessarily want $1 in return, right? I have had times when I've wanted to close down and shut down and say, I'm done, I'm done. And then I look at the children, like in the video that you saw, that just break me down, and they won't let me quit. I can't. So we have that group of social impact investors who will do this for free, and they'll give you a lot of money to do it. And you only need one per organization. You don't need 10 wealthy people, you need one. So relationships, start small, but it can be done. This is achievable. I am on the side of optimism, and I believe that even that digital divide, for example, is achievable. Making a difference in people's lives is achievable. Just one star at a time, one person at a time, and we can do it together.
Wow, this has been amazing. Someone is saying, do you accept donations?
Yeah. Yes, I'll take chicken, fried chicken, flowers, money, a shout out, an email, anything.
Please donate at you can also find at on LinkedIn. She will respond to your message almost immediately if you send it. Yeah. So I just want to bring everything you said in as we close. Yeah, one of the things that caught me a lot is actually what your dad said. It's extremely powerful, the impact of someone who is older, can have on you. One of the biggest shifts in my life happened when I just asked a basic question to someone who was just, by the road, who just thought I was doing so much work. And it is, just start it and let them tell you to stop. That's extremely powerful. So I'm going to leave it right there. Just start it and let them tell you to stop. That's extremely important. Another thing that Akinyi has said today that leaves me with speechless is the fact that every time we're having these conversations, we want to talk about post-COVID. I think that conversation is extremely important because there's something that it teaches us, but there's something that has also existed before, and it's the fact that we have no infrastructure to support learning. We still have poverty on this continent. These are factors that must be fixed. There's also the digital divide that currently exists. And she kept saying something so important. We still need books. Whether we decide to create laptops, to bring internet, we still need books. We still need teachers. We still need everything we needed before COVID-19. And if anything has happened with COVID-19, it is the fact that we need to understand how fast the world is moving. So thank you so much for this enlightening session. I really could write a book about everything I've learned today. I'm so excited for this opportunity to speak to you and to moderate the session. Thank you so much to Ashley, Beryl, Cassandra, Geneva, Felicia, Joanna, Joy, Laureline, Peggy, Renee, Tokes, Travis, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, guys. Shout out to all of you. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Bye.